Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Rabbi Spiro. I'm sorry I cannot speak your language, but hopefully you'll understand my English. The title of the talk was, Can There Be Happiness in the 21st Century? And I believe that I have some good news. I believe that for the first time in human history, there is a chance that we can achieve happiness. I think that people have been in pursuit of happiness and in search for happiness for thousands of years. But it seems to have always eluded us. Now, we don't have to go back to ancient history to understand the search of happiness. I mean, even in my own life as a child, that's ancient history already, but there was so much hardship in life that people could look forward and have an aspiration, an expectation as to what might bring them happiness. For example, before 1940, the average life expectancy in the Western world, and I'm sure here as well in the United States, the average life expectancy was 40. Why? Because the cases of infant mortality were very high. I mean, we knew of women who had 12, 13, 14 pregnancies, and only 3 or 4 children survived. Childhood diseases were very common. I myself had all of them. I had measles and chickenpox and mumps and scarlet fever and whooping cough, and I had them all. Our children today no longer have those. Back in the 1930s, work was very hard. I mean, the work week was long, and work was done with physical labor. And the workplace was not a comfortable place. Communication was very difficult. To go from the United States to Israel then in the 1930s was 4 weeks. There was no television. Telephones were few, and certainly there were no mobile phones. And the work in the kitchen was hard. And climate, if it was hot, there was only one thing you could do: sweat. There was no relief from the heat. And I think that people could look forward to the time when the human genius would be able to relieve so many of these hardships that people would be happy. I mean, imagine if you told someone in 1930, right, that you're going to be able to go from America to Israel in 9 hours. And everybody will be able to be in communication with everyone else in the world, just with a little mobile phone. No, you can have a mobile phone and talk to South Africa or to South America. And the household chores will be so much easier. There will be many electronic things. And in the kitchen you will have many instant foods that you don't have to prepare. And those foods that you do have to prepare, you can do in a microwave. In a matter of a few minutes. And automobile travel will be so comfortable. And the climate, you go into your room and if it's 38 degrees outside, you push a button and the air conditioning goes on and your climate is wonderful. And the workplace, I think that if anybody in the 1930s would go to a modern workplace, they would say, this is a workplace. This is a spa. Right? Comfortable carpeting, air conditioning, coffee breaks. Okay? So you see that in previous years, people could look forward that there are going to be things which can bring a human being happiness. If only all of these hardships will be eliminated. Okay? And our life will be comfortable. And instead of the average life expectancy being 40, it'll be 80, which is true today. Then we will have happiness. And so here we are in the year 2009, and we have already achieved all those marvelous, marvelous technological miracles. And the medical miracles, antibiotics, wonder drugs, surgery replacing worn out organs. I mean, everything we could think of as possibilities has already happened. And yet, people aren't happy. I can tell you that I made my living as a psychiatrist, and I can tell you that my friends and I are seeing many, many patients every day who are not happy. And the worst danger that is facing us today, especially with our young people who are being lost to drugs, who are running to drugs to get away from the misery of life. And we have youngsters age 11 and 12 on drugs. And I don't have to tell you how bad the drug scene is. Obviously, people are not happy. They're still escaping. So they're escaping into alcohol, they're escaping into drugs, they're escaping into gambling, they're escaping into overeating. People are still running, looking for happiness. So what's the good news? The good news is that we've discovered today that none of these things are going to work. I will ask you a very simple question. What is there that modern technology could do that would make people happy? What is there left to be invented? We already have the GPS that tells you how to drive and not to get lost. Right? What else is there? And if you think about it, there is nothing that modern technology can do that has any hope of bringing people happiness. And if we have reached that point, then humanity must come to the realization that there is nothing anymore that medicine or modern science can do that's going to make people happy. We're going to have to look for it elsewhere. Now, that couldn't have happened 40 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago. We were still groping for things to make us give happiness. Oh yes, there is one invention that is coming out now, and that is a system on an automobile to prevent an accident. And another thing, a system on an automobile to help you park backwards automatically. Those will be very welcome things. Okay? But I don't think that anybody believes that that is going to produce happiness. And what happens is that we've used up all the possibilities, and that finally we have to come to the conclusion it's got to be something else. It's not going to come from science, it's not going to come from technology, it's not going to come from medicine. It has to come from somewhere else. Where is the somewhere else? So let me first tell you a little incident that I think parallels this. Many years ago, when I began working, I had to work in a government hospital, a government mental hospital. And in those days, in the government hospitals, people who could not function normally in society were put in the hospital, and they stayed there 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, forever. And so I came to work in one of those hospitals, and they gave me a department, and in my department there were 200 patients who had been there for anywhere from a matter of a year to 10 years to 20 years. And so I said to the nurse, look, I want to become familiar with all of these 200 patients. I want to know who they are. So every day, I want you to bring me in 10 medical records, 10 charts of 10 people here. I will review the charts, and then I want to see the patient so I can associate the patient with the chart, with the history, and be familiar with them. Okay. So one day I looked at one of the charts, and this was a patient who was there for 3 years. She was a woman who was 55 years old. And according to the chart, she had been depressed for a number of years. And she was treated for depression in 3 different hospitals in the community. And when all of the treatments did not work, they put her in the government hospital to stay for who knows how long. So I looked over and studied the chart, and then I said to the nurse, okay, now I want to see this patient. And as soon as the woman came into the room, I said, oh my God, she has no thyroid. Because it's very obvious if you've seen someone who has no thyroid, right, that you could tell just by looking at them what the condition is. I said, she has no thyroid. Right? The thyroid gland, which produces a hormone, right? Thyroid, right? Familiar with the term? Anyway, then I went back and looked at the chart and got the records from the 3 hospitals that she had been in before she came to the government hospital. She was treated with this, treated with this, treated with this. None of the treatments worked. Nobody had done a test on the thyroid. Right? And if she was missing the thyroid, No matter what you did, she was not able to get better. Right? Because she was missing a chemical which is essential for proper function. And if she was missing that one body chemical, she could not get better no matter what you did. Okay. Now we know that the body has to have certain chemicals in order to function. We know that in order to be healthy, you have to have enough iron in your system, and you have to have calcium, and you have to have enough vitamin A and vitamin B and vitamin C and vitamin D and all of these minerals. Now, if you're missing vitamin C, for whatever reason you don't have the vitamin C, you're going to get a condition which we will call vitamin C deficiency. Your body is missing something. And what's going to happen is that if you bump yourself, you'll get a big, big bruise. Right? You brush your teeth and you'll bleed. Right? That's what happens if you miss vitamin C. If you're missing vitamin D, you'll have soft bones. Right? The bones will not work properly. If you're missing iron, you develop an anemia, low blood, right? And you'll be weak and depressed and whatever. So the body has all of these chemicals that it must have. We call them these essential vitamins and minerals. Okay. Now when the patient comes to the doctor, and the doctor sees the patient and he thinks, oh, this may be a deficiency condition. So he'll do a blood test. And if the blood test shows that the patient is low in iron and has an iron deficiency, the doctor will prescribe the proper medication. And if the patient has an iron deficiency, the doctor must prescribe iron. And if the doctor does not prescribe iron, the patient is never going to get any better. Now, the doctor may give the patient vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, right? And may give the patient copper and zinc and calcium and who knows what. But if he does not give the patient that one substance that the patient is missing, the patient can't get better. So we know that there are body deficiencies. Okay? Now, as human beings, we all have a body. But you know something between you and me? Our body is really nothing more than an animal body. The only difference is most animals walk on 4 feet, we walk on 2 feet. But the body is an animal body. Well, in what way are we different than animals? Not because of the body. We are different than animals because of our intelligence. We are more intelligent. But intelligence isn't the only difference. I can show you that there are many things which are special to the human being that an animal cannot do. For example, we have the ability to think about, what do I want to do with my life? What is my goal in life? What do I want to achieve during my life? I don't believe that animals do that. We have the ability to think about, what do I have to do to become a better person than I am? Can you imagine a cow thinking, what do I have to do to be a better cow than I am? Animals don't think that. We have the ability to think about what is right, what is wrong, and make a judgment about right and wrong. And sometimes if we have a strong desire to do something, but we know it is wrong, we won't do it. An animal cannot do that. Anything that an animal wants, it's going to do. If an animal is hungry, an animal must look for food. Is it possible that an animal will say, I'm very hungry, but I'm going to fast today? An animal can't do that. It can't resist the body drive. We have the ability to resist the body drive. Let me tell you something that was very, very, very pleasing to me. I've had 2 very frustrating days here. Not because of Amsterdam, God forbid. Amsterdam has been wonderful. I came here on a stopover from Israel. I stopped over in Prague. When we came to security, it was a madhouse. There were 15 million people trying to get through the security, and I only had a few minutes to the plane. And I didn't want to miss the plane. So, finally I got through security, but going through the bell rang. They said, take out the metal of your pockets. I said, I don't have any metal. Take everything out of your pockets. So I took everything out of my pockets and put it in. And meanwhile, it was so rushed to get to that I went through and rushed to get to the plane. And after the plane starts going, you ready? I don't have my wallet. And in my wallet I had money and credit cards and all of the other important things that you keep in your wallet. Anyway, these last 2 days, we made about 500 calls. Right? Between KLM and Czech Airlines and the Prague, and it was Baruch Hashem. This morning I got my wallet. Now, I was very happy to get it. I knew very well that the money would not be there. I mean, that wallet had gone through a number of people's hands. Anybody could have taken out the money and nobody would have known who it was. So I didn't expect the money to be there. This morning, Baruch Hashem, I got the wallet back. And every bit of money was there. Now, what about the people who handled that wallet? They saw the money. Why didn't they take it? Nobody could have caught them. There was no police watching them. What happened was that even though, and everybody has a desire to take money, everybody wants to get money, everybody wants to be richer. Why didn't they take it? And there was only one reason. Right? People had a conscience and they believed it was wrong. We have the ability to use our conscience, that even though we may want something very much, if we think it is wrong, we won't do it. Unfortunately, some people are not like that. Right? But apparently all of the people who handled this wallet had a conscience, and they did not touch the money. Animals do not have a conscience. An animal wants, it's going to go for something. We have the ability to do chesed. Chesed means I give of my belongings, tzedakah, I give of my energy, I give of my time, I give of my effort to help a stranger. When you give tzedakah, you don't even know who's going to get it. And you're giving from money that you earned by hard work. Why are you doing that? Because we believe in doing chesed. Now, can you imagine a scene in the jungle? There's a little jackal, a little small animal, that hasn't had any food. And he's looking for something to eat. And then he sees that there's a carcass of an animal, and he would like to eat it, but there's a tiger eating it now. Do you know how close he's going to get to that carcass? He's not going to try and take away food from a tiger. The tiger will kill him. Now what would be if the tiger would look around and see that little animal and say, oh, poor jackal. He hasn't had anything to eat in 3 days. Come here, jackal. Come here. You can have some of this meat. That's not going to happen. Animals in the jungle cannot do that. Now, if you have a pet dog and the dog picks up human traits, that's something else. But animals in the wild don't have any concept of helping a stranger. Chesed is not an animal trait. We have the ability to forgive someone who has harmed us. Do you know that if you irritate an animal, that animal will remember it? It's not going to forgive you. And if that animal has a chance to attack you 3 years later, it will do it. Because animals cannot forgive. So we have a number of abilities that animals do not have. And we can think of even more. Now, these are the things that make us different from animals. It's not our body. Now, I would like to take all of these abilities, these unique abilities that we have, and put them together and say that when you take all of these abilities together, that constitutes the human spirit. Now, what is the human spirit? The human spirit is the sum total of all the ways in which we are different than animals. Right? Now, that spirit is what makes us human. Without a spirit, we're an animal. Okay. Now, the body has certain needs. And if it does not get these needs, it's sick. But there's another part to us in addition to the body. We just agreed that we all have a spirit. Right? And the spirit too has its needs. And if you don't give the spirit what it needs, you're going to have a deficiency of spirit. A spirituality deficiency condition. So just like a person can have an iron deficiency, and a vitamin D deficiency, and a vitamin C deficiency, a person can also have a spirituality deficiency. Now, we know what happens if you have an iron deficiency. You get weakness, depressed. We know what happens if you have a vitamin C deficiency. You get easy bruising and bleeding. What's going to happen if you have a spirituality deficiency? What's the symptom going to be? The symptom is going to be a chronic unhappiness. The person is unhappy because he and she is missing something which is part of their being. It's not part of their body, but it's part of their personhood. Because being a person means you have a spirit. And if you don't give the spirit what it needs, it's just like not giving the body what it needs. But the symptom of a spirituality deficiency is chronic discontent, unhappiness. The only problem is that we don't realize that. So when a person feels unhappy, what's my problem? I'm not making enough money. What's my problem? I don't have a good enough house. What's my problem? I don't have a good enough car. So people are constantly blaming their unhappiness on various things, and they try to get those things, and when they get more money, when they get a better job, and when they get a better house, and when they get a better car, they're still unhappy. Now some people try to escape from the unhappiness by looking for something which will make them feel better. So one person discovers I take a drink, take a little alcohol. I feel better. Sure. For how long? An hour. An hour and a half. And then the effect of alcohol wears off. Then what? I need another drink. Someone else will find, I take heroin, I feel better. How long? 25 minutes. And then the effect of heroin wears off, you need more heroin. Cocaine, marijuana, any kind of chemical that will make a person feel better. People are trying to get away from the feeling of discontent. So, one person feels, I go to gamble, I go to the casino, I gamble, I feel better. How long is that going to last? So, people try, in desperation, people try various things in order to try and feel happier. But none of those things work for more than a short period of time. Not only that, if a person feels better when he drinks alcohol, pretty soon the alcohol doesn't make him feel better anymore. And the only thing he can do is drink more. And the same thing is with drugs, with heroin, with cocaine. No matter how much you use, it's never enough. You still have to have more and have more and have to have more. So all of the ways of, and in making money, I feel better making money. Right? So how much money is going to be enough? 100 million? 2 billion? 4 billion? 16 billion? 50 billion? You know, it's interesting. I personally think that the world is mishuga. I'll tell you why. There's a story of a man who came to see a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist says, "What's your problem?" He says, "I don't have any problems." "So why did you come to see me?" "My family said I had to go to see you." "What does your family think is your problem?" "My family thinks there's something wrong with me because I like pancakes." So the psychiatrist says, "That's crazy. There's nothing wrong with liking pancakes. I like pancakes too." And the man says, You do? You come to my house. You go up to the attic. I have boxes full of pancakes. The man is mishuga, right? What is the mishugas? Because pancakes are something that you eat. That's the value of them, right? Collecting pancakes that you're never going to eat is mishuga. Tell me, what's the difference? Money is something you can use to get what you want. Right? Now, how much do you need? Right? 500,000 euros? 1 million euros? 2 million, 3 million, 22 million? Finally, you get to the point where no matter how much you got, you're not going to be able to use it to get anything more. You know, the person who has $30 billion cannot get anything more than the person who has 20 billion. And they still go to make more money. Why? Tell me how those extra millions, those extra billions, how are they different than boxes of pancakes in the attic? But our society has decided that collecting pancakes is mishuga and collecting money is not mishuga. Right? I think they're wrong. I think collecting money is mishuga, unless you have something to do with it. But just collecting it, keeping it in the attic, what's the difference? So you see, I have talked with people who have billions of dollars. And I say, why are you going to the office to make more money? And they say, it's the thrill of making money. They don't need the money, right? But it's the thrill of making an extra few billion. Yeah. To me, that's no different than the thrill of anything else, the thrill of alcohol, the thrill of heroin, the thrill, whatever. Looking for ways in which to pick themselves up out of their chronic discontent. And you know something? There's never enough. There's never enough alcohol, there's never enough heroin, there's never cocaine, there's never enough food, there's never enough gambling, there's never enough sex, there's never enough money. And people constantly go to it. The other thing, as I pointed out, is that when a person feels unhappy, he starts looking for reasons. Why am I unhappy? I'm in the wrong job. Get another job. I live in the wrong neighborhood. Got to move. I live in the wrong city. Got to move. Pretty soon they've tried everything else, and no matter what they've done, right, they're not any happier. Now what? I'm married to the wrong woman. Right? Blame the marriage. Right? And so I know people who have broken up a marriage because they have been unhappy and had nothing to blame it on. So what else it must be? It must be the wife. Or if the wife leaves, it must be the husband. Looking for things to blame it on and never realizing that's not the problem of the unhappiness. The problem of unhappiness is just as they are deficient of iron, right? A person can also be deficient of spirit. They are not giving the spirit what it needs. And unless you give the spirit what it needs, you can't be happy. Right? So, I think that there's reason to get a new diagnostic term called spirituality deficiency disease. The problem is, when you go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, some conditions get better with certain medication. Some conditions, the psychologist will try to find out, now what went wrong with your childhood and what happened when you were younger and and that's why you're unhappy. But very few psychiatrists and very few psychologists have said, you know, you might be unhappy because you're not spiritual enough. Psychiatrists and psychologists don't talk that language. How many times will a psychiatrist say, have you ever thought of what you should do to be a better person than you are? Okay. Have you ever given much thought as to what you want to achieve with your life? What is your goal in life? How often do you think about, is this right or wrong, is it proper or improper? How much chesed do you do? You know, psychiatrists and psychologists don't talk about that. Right? So they miss the point. So a person can be going to a psychiatrist and psychologist because of his unhappiness, and they may take medications, sometimes they work. They may go into some sort of psychological therapy, and sometimes it works. But it can also happen that nothing will work because they're missing the point. They're missing the point that we're lacking in spirituality. Now, this lack of spirituality, this is true in everyone, in every human being. Because all of the things that I mentioned as being unique human traits, those are true of every human being on earth. So every human being can have a spirituality deficiency. But now comes along another human being to whom Hashem has given a neshama that requires the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvot. Right? And this person who has this neshama, the neshama needs its nutrition. It needs its vitamin B, it needs its vitamin C, it needs its essential minerals. And if we don't give the neshama what it needs, we're going to have a deficiency of the neshama. And the person will be unhappy and not know why and look for 1,000 different reasons to explain his unhappiness and try many things to overcome the unhappiness, and nothing will change. So you see, it comes down to be very simple. We have to know what are the needs of our body. We have to know what are the needs of our spirit. And we have to know what are the needs of our neshama. And if we provide all of these with the essential nutrients, with the essential substance that they need, we have a chance on having happiness. But as long as we're missing any of those three, there's no way that we're going to be happy. So what's happened in the 21st century? In the 21st century, we have come to the realization that all of the things that we thought that could give us happiness are not working. And they can't work, and they won't work even if we get more of them. And as I told you, we can't even think of any invention that is going to make mankind happier. We have them all already. This may bring mankind to the realization that in order to become happy, in order to get rid of our unhappiness and discontent, that we are going to have to seriously think about, are we being spiritual people? Are we using all of the kinds of the traits that make us human beings? Are we using our brains to the fullest? Are we perhaps not foolishly squandering our time? Tell me something. We all need entertainment. I agree. It's a need. But how much? What do you expect from sitting in front of the television hour after hour after hour? Getting nothing except foolishness. And not realizing that during that time you could be giving the body what it needs. You could be giving the spirit what it needs. Again, I'm not against having entertainment. But people spend hours and hours, especially youngsters. You know, children who are glued to the television set watch all kinds of useless programs, not giving them any information for hour after hour after hour. And why are children doing that? Because the adult world is doing it. And children are doing what the adult world is doing. Looking for entertainment. Constantly. Again, I have nothing against entertainment. You want to watch a football game? Kala kavod. No problem. But with a limit. And a football game is about the only thing that's left to watch on television. Today, there is no program on television except for sports that's worthwhile watching. Yeah? I come into a hotel. A lot of times I do my writing. When I need a little bit of rest for writing, I turn on the television. I watch the news for 10 minutes. Right? And then I see, is there a program I can watch? I can go through 100 stations. 100 stations and not find one program that's reasonable to watch. It's all trash and junk and disgusting. Sometimes I've got a mazal. Right? I find the football game. So I watch a football game for 15 minutes. But only for 15 minutes. Only for 15 minutes. Right? Because you can overdo it. Right? So entertainment is good. But it has to be healthy entertainment and not this kind of trash that goes into our minds and into the minds of our youngsters. I don't know what's happened in this country, but I know that in the United States we have a problem with violence in the schools. Right? I haven't followed the news in Holland. But in the United States, almost every few weeks, there's another shooting of children in school. Kids coming to school with guns and shooting other kids and shooting the teachers. Who ever heard of that? So where is it coming from? We know where it's coming from. It's coming from the violence shown on TV. Television violence causes violence in children. Everybody knows that. So why don't you stop it? Freedom of speech. There's no way to stop that. So what's happened is that we're in a situation where I think we've come to the realization in the 21st century that all of the things that we thought would bring us happiness are not working. They haven't worked and they're not going to work. Which leaves us only to one thing. Right? We have to look as to whether we may be spirituality deficient in our spirit, deficient in our neshama, and if we begin paying attention to those things, then I think we can develop a kind of happiness. A kind of happiness that is proper for a dignified human being. Not the happiness of alcohol, and not the happiness of heroin, and not the happiness of gambling, right? But the happiness that we should be proud of having as being a human being. So, I think, can there be happiness in the 21st century? I believe there can be, for the first time in history. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rabbi Twerski. It was a very special, inspirational speech. Thank you very much. Now for a few minutes, I don't know how long we have, some short questions.
Rabbi, I'd like you to speak very much. Do you agree that the goal of life is serving Hashem by feeding, like you are saying, your spirit and your neshama? Do you agree?
Yes. I think that, of course, we have to understand something about the service of Hashem. Right? We all have an idea about the service of Hashem, but there are different levels. Right? We think Avraham Avinu is the one who brought the idea into the world of one God. Right? Before then, there were idols, right? And Avraham Avinu came in and said, these idols are fake, they're worthless, there's only one true God. I don't believe that Avraham Avinu was the only person who realized that idols are worthless. Right? There must have been other people who realized that idols are worthless. I think what happened though was this. The people who believed in gods prayed to the gods because they wanted gods to do things for them. God, I want you to do this for me. I want you to do this for me. I want you to do this for me. They made God into servants of Hashem, of people. They wanted God to serve our needs. Avraham Avinu was the first one that came up with the idea of avodas Hashem. God isn't there to provide your needs. You're there to serve Hashem. Of course we have to have our needs. We can't function without our needs. We have to have our food, we have to have our clothes, we have to have our shelter. There's many things that we need in order to function properly. But functioning properly will then enable us to dedicate our lives to the service of Hashem. So, a true service of the neshama is not only asking God to do for me. Sure, we ask Him. Right? In the Amidah, in the Shemona Esrei, we ask God to help us, give us this, give us what we need, give us our health, give us our cure our diseases. Those are all kinds of things that we need. But for what? And that was Avraham Avinu's contribution. Right? That not only to expect that God should give us what we need, right? Because that makes God into a servant of man. But that we have avodas Hashem, to do what Hashem wants. Why Hashem wants that, that's not for us to know. Right? But this then is the observance of the Torah and of the mitzvot of Hashem. Not because I want something for me, right? but because that is why Hashem created me. That's a higher level of Avodat Hashem. If a person does everything right, but doesn't take that next level of Avodat Hashem, then he'll be missing in the neshama. And that was Avraham Avinu's great contribution. The problem is that we sometimes lose sight of it. And we think that as long as we're doing everything for ourselves in a kosher way, that's good. We say, no, that's not good enough. It's good, but it's not good enough. But you see, what's happened is that today we have things that make it easier to be kosher than there was in 1930. Do you know what we had in Pesach in the 1930s? You know what we ate on Pesach? We had meat and chicken and potatoes and potatoes and more potatoes and more potatoes. We did not have chocolate-covered matzahs. Right? We did not have all the candies and marshmallows. Right? We did not have Passover pizza. None of those things existed. We got along with much less. Right? We did not have glatt kosher Chinese. We did not have glatt sushi. We did not have glatt chalav Yisrael ice cream. None of those things. So we got along with much less. And now as we have more and more and more things that are kosher, we are now enjoying ourselves more and more and more kosher. I mean, it's all right. I don't want to take that away from you. I don't want you to take away my chalav Yisrael ice cream, you know. But enjoying chalav Yisrael ice cream and enjoying Chinese glatt kosher is not the goal of my life. I have to go beyond that. And not only what is going to satisfy me, but what does Hashem want of me? And this is where we get to the kinds of things that we learn in the Sfarim about what does Hashem expect of me. And when we do the Avodat Hashem, then we are fulfilling the needs of the neshama, and we have a chance of happiness. Thank you for the question.
I enjoyed your speech, thank you. What I've been missing is a definition or a description of happiness. It is as if when you mention the concept of happiness, all of us here are thinking of the same thing. I'm not sure if that's true. In many examples that you gave, you are actually describing comfort as if that is happiness, but probably it is not. So I would like to have an idea of what happiness is like.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because all of the things that we've talked about is that people have thought, and still do, that happiness means comfort and pleasure. Right? And I say comfort and pleasure are very fine. But we have found out that comfort and pleasure enough cannot produce happiness, and that a person can be very depressed or dissatisfied. That's the word I want. That a person will be dissatisfied with oneself, right? Will be dissatisfied with oneself in spite of having all the comforts and pleasures. Right? So then, what is happiness? It's a very interesting point raised by Rab Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. Right? Great person. Rab Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says that when two words in Hebrew are similar, they must have a connection. Right? And he mentions this many times. And then he points out that there is the word someach. Someach means happy. And there is a word that is very similar. Tzomeach. Tzomeach means growth. And Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says that is to tell you, right, that the only true happiness is a person growing. Right? Now, At age 18 or 19, we stop growing, right? But we stop growing physically. Spiritually, we can grow when we're 20 and 30 and 40 and 80 and 90 and 100. And so I think that, I'm very glad that you raised the point, that happiness means continuing to grow. It is beyond comfort. In fact, we have indications of people who have been happy in spite of the fact that they've been suffering and that they had marked discomfort and were in pain, and yet were able to feel happy, did not go around crying, did not go around complaining, did not go around dissatisfied, right? But were accepting the reality of their lives and trying to improve themselves and trying to grow. One of the points that I'd like to mention with is something that to me has been very edifying. And that is, I came across an article one day. I was sitting in a dentist office and I was waiting, and I picked up a magazine, and there was an article that says, "How do lobsters grow?" You know something? I don't care how lobsters grow. But I read the article, and then the article showed me something that was very important. A lobster is a soft little animal, and it lives inside a very hard shell. That hard shell does not expand. It's not flexible. So what happens as the lobster grows, that hard shell becomes to be very oppressive, very tight, and the lobster feels uncomfortable. So you know what it does? It hides itself under a rock and throws off the shell. And it grows a new shell. A larger one, a more spacious one. Right? So now it feels comfortable. But eventually the lobster grows so much that this new shell now becomes very tight. So what does it do? Goes back under the rock, throws off the shell, grows a bigger one. And it does this numerous times until it reaches its maximum growth. What makes the lobster grow? Right? The oppression, the feeling of discomfort, right? That drives it to take off the confining shell. Think about it this way. If lobsters could have a doctor, right, what would happen? As soon as the lobster feels oppressed and uncomfortable, it goes to a doctor and says, "I feel so tight and compressed and uncomfortable." The doctor says, "Oh, here's a prescription for a tranquilizer, and here's a prescription for a pain pill, and now you'll feel comfortable." You know, the lobster will die this big. Right? It'll never grow. Because the lobster is teaching us, right, that when you feel discomfort, that may be a sign that you need to grow. Now, obviously there are kinds of discomfort that doctors should take care of. But there's so many people that don't recognize that the discomfort that they feel or the unhappiness they feel, that's nature's way of telling you it's time to grow and become a better person. How do you become a better person? Doing all the kinds of things of the Spirit. Right? Reflecting more again, what do I want to do with my life? How can I become a better person? What are my character defects? Am I still apt to be very angry at other people? Right? Do I control my anger well enough? Do I carry grudges? Do I envy people? Do I hate people? Am I able to forgive? All of the kinds of things in which we should work upon ourselves, right, to become better people by improving our spirituality. So, I think that Shamshel Farrell Hirsch was right. And the question that the gentleman asked is very right. What is happiness? Happiness is growth. It's not comfort, it's not convenience, it's not contentment, it's growth. Thank you.
Rabbi, could you tell us, please, as a rabbi and a psychiatrist, what you think is the key for a happy marriage and a good shlom bayit?
Okay. An excellent question. An excellent question. And I would like to give to you what I think is a proper answer. Okay? First, let's take the example that often happens in marriage, at least in the secular world. A young man and a young woman meet and they fall in love and they get married. Right? Fine. Something's wrong with that because 50% of marriages end up in divorce. At least in the United States. What happened to all the love? So we have to understand what love is all about. They tell the story that the Rebbe of Kotsk once came across a young man who was sitting and eating fish and obviously enjoying it. So he went over and he said to him, "Young man, why are you eating the fish?" He looked up at him and he said, "Because I love fish." "Oh, you love fish. You love the fish so much, that's why you took it out of the water and killed it. And cooked it. Don't tell me that you love the fish. If you love the fish would still be in the water. You love yourself. And because the fish tastes good to you, so that's why you eat it." Okay. This young man and this young woman fall in love. What does that mean? This young man sees in this young woman someone who he thinks will give him all of the things that he desires in life. She will satisfy all his needs. She looks at this young man and she feels this young man will provide for her all of the needs and all the emotional needs that she has. Do you realize what this is? He wants a relationship for all that he can get for himself. Right? She wants the relationship for all that she can get for herself. This love is fish love. He doesn't love her and she doesn't love him. Right? Each one loves themselves. Marriages that are based on fish love, right? Now, maybe it begins all right, but if that's where it stays, it's going to get into trouble. Now, if it develops into a relationship, not of what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? How can I make you happier? Those marriages will stay, and those marriages will have shlom bias. 99% of shlom bias problems, or maybe 100% of them, are because each one is looking for their own selfish needs. Right? I knew of one marriage where there was a very good shlom bias. It was my parents' marriage. Right? And I must share with you this story because it's very important to me. My father used to go to the hospital every day to see patients. And he knew so much about medicine because of his talking with the doctors that he knew more medicine than some of the doctors. Later in life, in his 70s, he developed cancer of the pancreas, which spread to the liver. And when he got the diagnosis, he knew what that meant. And so he said to me, "Chemotherapy for cancer of the pancreas doesn't do much, does it?" I said, "No." He said, "But it has a lot of side effects." He says, "If it could do something for me, then I would take the side effects. But if it's not going to extend my life, then why should I just take the treatment that's going to make me suffer and not do anything good for me?" I said, "You're right." I said, "Okay." So he said, "So we understand each other. There's not going to be any chemotherapy." I said, "Okay." My mother talked with the doctor, and the doctor said to her, "There's not much we can do for the rabbi. We can do chemotherapy. Maybe we can get 3 extra months." And my mother said, 3 extra months? For 3 extra days you have to do it. Every day is precious. So she came into my father and she said, look, you're going to take chemotherapy. After she left, my father said to me, I'm sorry that the doctor gave her the wrong information. Because I know it's not going to extend my life. He says, but you know something? If I refuse the chemotherapy, then when I die, Mother will say, if I had only insisted on chemotherapy, he could still be alive. And then she will feel guilty that she didn't insist on chemotherapy. I don't want her to feel guilty. So I'll take the chemotherapy. I've done so many things for Mother. This gives me one more chance to do something. That was the kind of relationship they had. They did not fall in love. The first time my father met my mother was after the chuppah. Right? He did not know her, she did not know him. I just ask him, the Talmud says that you're not allowed to marry a woman until you've seen her. He says, the night before the chuppah, there was a little gathering. The men were in this room, the women were in that room. And somebody came over and said to me, look over there, that's the kallah. He said, until this day, I don't know who I saw. This was not a marriage that was based on fish love. This was a marriage that was based on, we have an obligation to develop a family that is going to add to kavod shamayim, to the glory of Hashem. Right? That was what their life was all about, and it wasn't for oneself. So, what is the message for Shalom Bayis? A very simple one, right? To get out of the fish love thing, and to stop thinking of what you're going to get out of the relationship, and start thinking of what I can give to the relationship. And when a husband and wife will each think, what is it that I can do to make you happier, then there will be Shalom Bayis. Thank you for listening.